Welcome to Come to Your Senses, the School of Sensual Living podcast. I'm your host, Mary Lofgren. Here, we explore how to live bravely and beautifully through pleasure, mindfulness, embodiment, femininity, beauty, art, and of course, everyday sensuality. Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to the podcast. So grateful to be here with you today to bring you part 2 in a 2-part series called Tending Your Resplendent Feminine Nervous System. So last week, I shared a bit about the nervous system's role in our mental health, in our overall sense of well-being, and particularly around how the nervous system protects us when it comes to taking risks or growing outside our comfort zone, and how to know your accelerators and your brakes when it comes to your stress response. But what's so essential to understand about the link between sensual living and your nervous system is kind of like I shared last week. Every feeling and sensation that you have in your body is a consequence of the state of your nervous system. And so when your nervous system is toned and relaxed and open and safe, you can very freely welcome in feelings of pleasure, joy, satisfaction, fulfillment. When the nervous system is in a stress response, putting up a bit of armor and numbness, it does not matter how much self-care you do, how much pleasure you offer yourself. When that numbness as a result of protection is on board, you may recognize that you should be in pleasure. If you've ever had the experience of being out on a date with your spouse or being on vacation and you're like, why don't I feel anything? Why do I feel like I should be feeling good and yet I feel nothing? And there can be a lot of different layers to what's going on in those situations, but one of those layers is that when the nervous system is either in a state of sustained fight, flight, freeze, or has been in a chronic sustained state of fight, flight, freeze. It's almost like driving a car. If you slam on the brakes, there's going to be a bit of whiplash. And so if your nervous system has to kind of slam on the brakes in order to slow down, your system is going to be tending to that impact rather than being able to be fully present. And so what I want to share with you today is some really juicy, delicious information as to how to bring more tone and more beauty and more resplendence to your nervous system, not just as a form of recovery or reward, but as a form of nurturance to nurture the health of your body, the health of your mind, and the health of your nerves, so that you can A, become more skilled at how to help yourself if you're experiencing a stress response, and B, help bring more resplendence to your life overall through the experience of being in your body. And this information that I'm sharing with you today is a critical piece of the embodied intelligence coaching system that I am currently enrolling a small handful of women into for the fall-winter session. Unlike traditional methods of coaching that focus almost exclusively on mindset and thought retraining, in this style of coaching, we take a bit of a deeper dive into the sensations and the wisdom of your body. We know that every action we take is a result of a thought that we have. what may surprise you is that every thought that we have is a consequence of a sensation in our body. So, for example, if you feel the sensation of thirst, you will have the thought, drink some water, and you will carry out that action. Similarly, if you are desiring to make a career change and that idea presents you with a sensation of fear in your heart and your belly, your thoughts will respond to that sensation with protective mechanisms of, don't do it, now's not the time, here's all the reasons that you're going to fail. So if you would like to take more exquisite care of your body and health, if you want to show up more in a position of leadership and confidence in your career, if you want to pursue relationships from a greater place of confidence and clarity, being able to interpret and work with and embrace the sensations in your body with wisdom and skill is essential to getting there. And that is what embodied intelligence coaching is all about, is helping you become an authority in the wisdom and intelligence of your own body. So the fall-winter session is open through the end of this month. October 30th is the last day to apply. As of this recording, there are 2 spots left in this incubator. So head over to schoolofsensualliving.com/coaching to learn more. The word tend is a verb that means to care for or look after, to give one's attention to. So when we talk about tending the garden of our nervous system, there are 2 ways to go about that. The first is what I like to call the injury model when it comes to self-care. The injury model views pleasure, rest, relaxation, satisfaction, all of these things as either a form of reward for hard work done or recovery from lots of energy spent on hard work. With both of these, an injury is required to initiate the experience of care. So it's kind of like if you had a garden and all you ever did to the garden was weed it. You never offered it water, you never pruned the plants, you never clipped the blossoms. You were just really honed in on plucking those weeds, and you would probably get some result from the garden. But as a listener of this podcast, I would imagine that when it comes to your body and your system, you yearn for an experience more than just plucking weeds. You are more attuned to the nourishment model, where care is about a lot more than just recovery, but it's about replenishment so that you have more to give. And so when we talk about your nervous system, a lot of the education out there about how to care for your nervous system focuses on just one thing, which is relaxation. Deep breathing, meditation, getting good sleep, things along those lines, which are vitally important and understandable that is our method of care, considering that our world moves so fast. But what I want to share with you today is that when it comes to your nervous system, particularly your feminine nervous system, keeping in mind that feminine simply means those who identify with the creative, feeling, flowing energy that we sometimes call the feminine, the garden of your system needs more than just one type of care. And you may find that your ability to access rest and relaxation lies in more than just one location, such as sitting in a room alone in a fixed position with your eyes closed. You may find that your deepest level of rest and relaxation comes when you're strolling an art gallery or enjoying a warm cup of tea while watching the snow fall outside of a coffee shop window in a city. I recently moved back to the city of Asheville, where I lived for 5 years. I've lived long-term in 2 places in my life, New York City and Asheville, North Carolina. 3 if you count where I grew up in upstate New York. And when I moved here and left New York City, it was like I was so tired of being in the city and being cramped and being away from nature. And so my first year when I moved here was really wonderful and beautiful, and I was soaking up the sun, and I was enjoying decorating more than a postage stamp style or size of space, and taking Winnie on long hikes, And then my true city mouse self began to get bored. I am really truly a city mouse. It is an essential nutrient to me to be in that city energy. But I didn't know that about myself at the time. I just thought that I was being ungrateful, or I thought that there was something wrong with me, that I didn't care about nature, being in nature as much as my friends did. And so I tried harder to become more of like that type of person. I attended lots and lots of new agey type of events, trying to calm the growing anxiety in my chest and in my belly that was keeping me up at night, that I was just really unsatisfied and unhappy. And one day I realized that I had become really good at managing my unhappiness and less good at actually moving towards the things that I knew made me happy. And I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to feeling like there's something wrong with you if you're not happy where you are, and that maybe you need to just dig deeper into where you are, bloom where you're planted. And I encourage you to do that experiment, because I did for 4 or 5 years and conclusively found that this was not an issue of bloom where you're planted. This was an issue of feeling like a kidney that had been transplanted into a body that had a different blood type than my own. And I just needed to kind of get out of here. So I moved back. I moved back to New York City. I was blissfully happy. I mean, just felt like I had come home again. I could really feel like the deepest parts of my roots getting watered. And 2 months after I moved, the pandemic hit. And New York felt really unsafe. And I knew that if I was going to stay in New York, I had a dog, I had Winnie, and I had to touch 8 doorknobs just to get out the door. And I just wasn't comfortable with that. So I left New York once again, and I came back to Asheville to stay at an Airbnb. Very long story short, I just bought my first home here in Asheville. Why on earth would I buy a home in a place that feels like a rejected kidney? Well, what's interesting is that having had the experience of going back to New York and feeling myself come alive again, and knowing that that part of me that intuitively knows what pleases me, what makes me happy, is still very much alive and well and kicking. It hadn't left me with age or the choice to get sober, which I did several years ago, which temporarily made me feel like I'd never be fun again. Going back to the city and feeling that come alive in my system again, let me know that that was in me. And so when an opportunity presented itself to buy a home here, Asheville hadn't changed, but I had greatly changed. And my ability to take pleasure from being here, from being in small community, from being in nature, has shifted, because my need for that city energy, even though it was in a small dose, has been met. And I know that in order to keep my inner energetic oxygen levels at optimal state, that's a need that I need to tend to in myself. Now, before I left, I was meditating, I was yogaing, I was doing everything within my power. My self-care routine was taking like 6 hours of my day to manage the fact that I was anxious and unhappy, and using this kind of one-pronged approach to address my system, which is like a garden and is vast in its composition of what it needs for nourishment. My system didn't need more nature and quiet. As Walt Whitman says, "Keep your quiet places by the woods. Give me the streets of Manhattan." And so what I'm going to share with you now are some things that may provide nourishment and nurturance and replenishment to your nervous system. So the first is beauty. Have you ever walked into a gorgeous room or a beautiful garden and felt your whole body relax? Beauty helps us feel safe. When we are in a mode of survival, beauty falls low on the list of priorities. So when the need for beauty has been tended to, it sends a signal to our system that all is well, survival is taken care of, and there is extra creative life force energy to give towards beauty. Beauty is recognized in every spiritual tradition as a pathway to the divine. Beauty is how we make sense of our greatest sorrows and how we celebrate our greatest joys. Beauty and art inspire us into new ways of thinking, into worlds that have not yet been imagined. Beauty reminds us of why we're here on the planet, what really matters, and who we really are. And one of my favorite ways to play with beauty is to go on a beauty walk. So to find an environment that you find beautiful, for your system that might be a botanical garden, or it might be a city boutique, or a hotel lobby, or a tree-lined avenue. Whatever it is for you, take yourself on a walk and allow your senses to be filled up with beauty, and notice how that makes your body feel. Another need for your resplendent feminine nervous system is the need for depth and intimacy. So we all know the difference between a superficial, fluffy conversation, and as an experiment, I'll invite you to just remember the last time you had a fluffy, "How are you?" conversation, and how that felt in your body. I notice in my own body, I feel exhausted, my eyes are starting to droop, and my whole system is starting to harden, like my muscles are starting to harden. Versus a really deep, intimate, easeful one, and notice how that feels in your system. Just like we need fluffy rom-coms, we also need deeply moving drama. Both are necessary for our nervous system to feel alive, to feel connected and seen. And so some ways that you can pursue that need for depth and intimacy in your everyday are through intentional, sincere eye contact. So now more than ever, with our faces hidden behind masks, intentional, sincere eye contact is so essential for those micro moments of connection. Truth-telling is a way to increase the level of intimacy and cut through the static of the fluff. Deeply listening to someone speak, and listening beyond what they're saying, but listening to how they're saying it, how their body is moving as they say it. And notice, as you experiment with this flavor of energy, how does depth and intimacy make your body feel? To go to the other side of the spectrum, humor and lightness are also essential for your nervous system to be attuned. I remember a time when I had a very emotionally intense conversation, and I got in the car and I had a long drive home, and I was listening to an audiobook that was very, very heavy. And I turned it on, and suddenly my body felt like it had filled up with cement. It felt so heavy. So my nervous system had reached a threshold of depth and intimacy. It was almost like cake batter that has too little liquid, and it needed something light and fluffy like an egg white, to smooth it out. So I turned on a comedy podcast in the same way that I might take Advil for my headache. It was medicine for lightening up and smoothing out that heaviness in my cells. About a half an hour of laughing and seeing life through a different lens allowed my nervous system to settle. And then halfway through the drive, I went back to my original book because that release of lightness and humor had cleared the space for more depth and intimacy. So, however you engage with humor and lightness, whether it's through comedy, a friend, a rom-com, watching Emily in Paris, which I have not yet seen but heard a lot about, how does that experience make your body feel? And one thing I want to add is that when it comes to really meeting your nervous system, a lot of it is studying these binaries. And when you feel yourself edging towards the end of one spectrum or another, offering your system a little bit of its opposite to help bring you back to center and back to baseline. So in other words, I think we all have had the experience of being in a conversation with someone who's a comedian, and that humor and lightness kind of feels like you're a balloon that's just floating into the sky. You know, after too much of it, or after you reach your threshold, you need a little bit of that depth and intimacy and connection to help bring you back down to ground, and vice versa. Another essential truffle on the tray of treating your nervous system and tending your nervous system is sensual pleasure. So remember that here at the School of Sensual Living, we define sensuality as nothing more and nothing less than using your senses to become fully present in your body so that you may become fully present in your life. And often sensual pleasure is not so much about the kind of experience that we're having, but more about how we're showing up for said experience. So my dad, God bless him, was a real health nut. If you told him that eating roaches on toast would boost his immune system, he would have done it. He had a very scientific kind of clinical approach to treating his body well and giving his body the best. And I remember one time seeing him pour a tablespoon of olive oil into a tablespoon measuring spoon and just kicking it back and making a funny face. And I was like, Dad, what are you doing? You know? And he was like, well, I read in a magazine that a tablespoon of olive oil a day, I don't know, helps your brain health or something like that. And it was just such a marvel to me that would be his approach, rather than drizzling olive oil on a salad or putting it on some pasta, that he'd just kick it back, And my dad was super wired for anxiety and had kind of a really hard time settling into his body. And so a reminder that sensual pleasure doesn't have to mean an all-inclusive vacation. It can simply be pausing in the middle of your day to inhale and ingest the aroma of a flower. Sensual pleasure can be laying down in your bed with one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and slowly making your hands move with your breath. Sensual pleasure is an intrinsic experience of using your senses to still your mind, rather than an experience from the outside that helps numb you enough so that your mind will shut up. And so from that intrinsic approach, noticing how sensual pleasure can make your body feel. Next truffle on the tray is activation. So as I shared earlier, our collective need for rest and relaxation is absolutely great indeed. But only turning towards the yin side of the yin-yang symbol answers only half of the equation. So when you are feeling down, sluggish, depressive, dissociated, what may be needed in that moment is not more relaxation, but is more jumping jacks or a night out on the town. Whatever breaks up that slow, stagnant energy counts as activation. And the last truffle that I want to share about with you is one of my favorites and what I find is one of the most essential, which is friendship and community. So the etymology of the word relate is to be brought back. Sometimes when tending your mental health, your state of being is a solitary affair, it can feel very lonely and isolating. And often what the body is really searching for is not more techniques, but it's actual human connection. And that can come in the form of family or friends, or it can also come in taking actions in your life to be of service to others. Service gets us out of our own head and reminds us that the world is bigger than our own belly button. And so service could be volunteering for something that you believe in, donating or tithing to an organization that you admire, taking your dog on an extra long walk as a gift to their nervous system, bringing some biscuits and fresh jam to your elderly neighbor's doorstep, or simply, maybe not so much in a pandemic, but picking up a stray paper towel in a public restroom so the next person's experience is more pleasant. Just simple ways to get out of that vacuum of attention on self and expand your body's connection to being part of the human family. So I am so curious how expanding your repertoire of care for your beautiful body and your brilliant mind affects you and your life and your community. You can always connect with me on Instagram at Hello Mary Lofgren. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, you can also leave me a review at schoolofsensualliving.com/review. And if you'd like to take the deep dive into embodied intelligence, head over to schoolofsensualliving.com/coaching to learn more. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time. For coaching, classes, and community in sensual living, head over to schoolofsensualliving.com. There you'll find a free video workshop in how to overcome anxiety and feel confident in almost any situation through the skill and power of your body language. Go to schoolofsensualliving.com/confidence to start your journey today.